Hello, everyone. I'm Harvey Brownstone, and today I'm pleased to welcome a writer and producer who was in large part responsible for one of the most groundbreaking, beloved, and enduring situation comedies in television history, The Jeffersons. This Emmy and Golden Globe Award winning sitcom ran for 11 years and received numerous accolades and tributes for, at long last, presenting an affluent Black family to television audiences, as well as dealing with many controversial social issues. Our guest started out as a writer on the show and ended up being an executive producer and showrunner. He's written a fascinating book about that experience called Honky in the House, Writing and Producing the Jeffersons. I'm delighted to welcome Jay Moriarty to our show. Jay, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure, Harvey.
Jay, I have to tell you, I was a huge fan of the Jeffersons and really enjoyed your book, and it made me want to watch the whole series all over again. So I bought the DVD box set. So thanks for inspiring me to do that.
Wow. Yeah, it's funny. A lot of people apparently have been watching, during this pandemic stuff. I think a lot of people want to escape and remember when they could laugh and they watch stuff that they grew up in. A lot of people are living longer now too these days. So they're still around, people that grew up watching Good Times and Jeffersons and All in the Family and a lot of Norman Lear stuff.
We all know that the Jeffersons was a creation of the legendary Norman Lear, who was also responsible for All in the Family, Maude, and Good Times. Is it true that the Black Panthers had something to do with convincing Norman Lear to make the Jeffersons a wealthy family?
Yeah, Norman would tell you that some members of the Black Panthers showed up at the office and said they wanted to speak to the garbage man, meaning Norman Lear. They were referring to Good Times was the first, Black family on TV, and it was Norman's show. And their complaint, the Black Panthers, was that, gee, all you're showing is a poor Black family, living in Cabrini Green in the projects in Chicago. And John Amos, the father, has to have 2-3 different jobs. Norman was already considering spinning off the Jeffersons from All in the Family. So the Black Panthers kind of motivated him to say, hey, why don't we make it an upscale Black family?
You were very much a product of the late 60s, which was a time of racial tension, the Vietnam War, hippies, drugs, protest marches, the sexual revolution. You write that you loved comedy that was relevant, like Laugh-In and the Smothers Brothers. What drives your sense of humor? Is it the desire to mix funny and serious at the same time?
Yeah, I think, to boomers, like you say, who grew up post-war babies, you had the feeling that wanted to change the world. I don't know if you watched the Chicago 7 movie, and I think only people who were around then can understand what those Chicago 7 were attempting to do. But yeah, we just felt that comedy should address the things that were going on in the 60s and the 70s, like the war in Vietnam and racial strife and stuff like that. And before that, television comedy was basically, Beverly Hillbillies and Petticoat Junction and just stuff that, I Dream of Jeannie. And so the feeling was that, hey, we should be talking about what's really happening. And that, I think, Archie Bunker and All in the Family, that was the first, when I first saw All in the Family, that just changed everything for me. It was, hey, this is satire. Hey, Archie and Meathead are talking about things that are happening in today's world, and when I got a chance to write for Norman and spend time on the Jeffersons, I just felt really privileged to be able to talk about what's happening now. George Jefferson's, we tried to do relevant comedy and keep it funny. It's really, comedy's a weapon. You can use it for good things, like pointing out to people things that maybe should be addressed with more than just humor. But humor makes you think, so.
Well, you wrote in your book that good comedy should make you think, laugh, and be informed. Who were your comedic role models?
Well, I've kind of grew up studying everything from Lenny Bruce, who's stand-up, and of course, stand-up world, Richard Pryor talked about real things. I mean, Norman's really my idol. When I saw All in the Family, it just changed everything for me, because before that, I thought comedy and drama were two separate things, that you either were doing comedy or you were writing drama. When I saw All in the Family, you'd be laughing one minute and have tears in your eyes the next minute. So I really saw that, that can work. You can do comedy and you can be funny and be real at the same time, and make people think. Norman would always kind of, you'd be writing a script, he'd say, you know, we could have a moment here. And by moment, he meant something that would make the audience do more than just laugh.
You've said that there's a thin line between creepy and funny, and defining that line is the secret to comedy. How do you define that line?
You're asking me good questions there, Harvey. That's between creepy and funny. I think everybody has to draw that line for himself. Yeah, it's, you know, comedy is risk. I think I say that in the book too. I also, you know, I spent a number of years teaching writing at USC Film School. I always tell my students comedy is risk. So you take a chance sometimes at being funny when you actually find out you're being a little creepy, but you have to take that chance.
So, Jay, in the early 70s, after working at an insurance company for 4 years, you managed to get an agent and you found a writing partner. Most writers work alone, but what is it about comedy writing that lends itself to working with a writing partner?
Yeah, that's a good question too. Comedy, if you tell a joke in the forest, is it funny? Nobody's there to laugh. You're not sure what's funny or what's creepy. So it's good to have two people. When I was you know, exec producing, show running the Jeffersons, I'd always look for scripts with two names on it because it's better chance that, you know, at least one of them is not creepy. So we like to hire teams. Now, when you hire a writing team, you get two for the price of one too. You're splitting the money.
So, what does it feel like to write a comedy script and then actually see people laughing in all the right places?
That's the best. That's the best thing. I don't know if you've ever experienced that, but I mean, you seem like a guy that has a great sense of humor yourself. So you know what it's like it's such a powerful thing to be able to make people laugh. But it was so nice doing sitcoms when we did in front of a live audience. That makes all the difference. And that live audience will tell you what's funny and what's not. So we'd be writing a script one week and shooting it the next week, and you get instant feedback. Jefferson audiences were great. I mean, they were the greatest. All that, you know, people talk about laugh tracks in sitcoms. We never had, it's all fresh squeezed laughs from real people.
Now I've got a more difficult question. What's it like to write a script that you believe is really good, and then you see it substantially changed by other writers who are higher up in the food chain, who you have almost no respect for?
Well, first of all, I respect anybody who tries to take a blank piece of paper and turn it into something people will laugh at. But yeah, a lot of times you feel, you know, when you're starting out, that's what happens. You know, you go and pitch a story. First of all, so many people think that if they see somebody's name up there and says written by Joe Jones, that Joe Jones wrote it. Well, that's not, unless you see Joe Jones' name on staff, he might not have written a word in there. What happens is you write it, you're Joe Jones, you pitch a story and they like the story, they work it out with you. Usually a lot of times the story you pitch isn't even the story you end up writing, because whatever they say, you know, what about it, and do this? Oh, okay. So you write it anyway, and then it gets first draft, second draft, they take it, and then it gets rewritten. Yeah, no, that's what happens. But you gotta, you know, that happens in movies too. You know, movies are even worse. You know, it's the director and the actors, and you know, you get stars and they change lines. Yeah, it's not a good feeling, but to be rewritten. But every writer experiences it at one time or another. You know.
So eventually, after banging on enough doors and getting a few writing assignments, you and your writing partner end up writing for the Jeffersons. Now, I know you hate being asked the question, which is how can a white person write for a black show? So I'm not going to ask it, because you do answer the question thoroughly and very convincingly in chapter 18 of your book. My question to you is this. Given the polarization between white and black that has recently escalated since the 70s, do you think that white writers today would ever have a chance to write scripts for a black show?
Well, I would hope so. The same way I would hope that black writers would be able to write for a white show. I think there's really more realization today. I think black and white writers realize that you know, you don't have to be a man to write for a woman. You don't have to be a drug addict to write a character about a drug addict. You know, it's all about research. You know, same as acting. You know, you don't have to be a serial killer to play a serial killer. You don't have to be, you know, like Carol O'Connor, who was just the opposite, really, a liberal-minded guy, plays a big. So it's a writing. You're just writing about characters, and I think black writers and white writers will realize that today, more so even than maybe in the past. However, there's always a cultural thing, you know. I mean, if you happen to have an experience in this world as a person of color, you'll certainly maybe have a different experience from a person who has what's known today as white privilege, you know. But I think everybody's tries to understand each other better these days. You know, one thing that's different though is the words that, for instance, the N word. I mean, young people today, my kids and my grandkids, it's like you can't say the N word. It's like you can't say it at all. And you know, in Norman Lear shows, it was said occasionally. Usually, if it was in a, it wouldn't have been in a script. It would be Sherman absolutely ad libbing it at certain times at work. But everybody laughed, and you know, I quote Lenny Bruce in the book that the more you say a word, the more you take away its power.
There was a biracial couple on the Jeffersons, Tom and Helen Willis. This was very leading edge at the time, and I understand the show got a lot of hate mail about this. Is that right?
Oh yeah, oh yeah. In fact, in the book, I print one of those letters specifically from a gentleman in Louisiana saying about miscegenation and blacks and whites exchanging spittle and Marxist producers and communists. And every week, this guy used to write a letter to the show, and he put copies to all the sponsors. And one day after a run through, Isabel Sanford played Louise, said, you know, we ought to call him and thank him for watching our show. So everybody, long story short, everybody got on the phones in offices and we called this guy in Gretna, Louisiana. We thanked him for watching the show. We never heard from him again, though.
Jay, you gave a not so subtle hint in the book that your parents and your family friends back home in Ohio were not particularly favorably impressed that you were writing for the Jeffersons. Why?
Yeah, well, you know, I guess you have to read a book, maybe you get an idea. But yeah, people, you know, it's funny because you like to think that then was then and now is now and much more progressive now. But really, there has been a recurrence of the same kind of polarization that there was in the 60s between blacks and whites.
The chapter in your book about the suicide episode was very telling. Your immediate bosses nixed the idea of having Florence, the maid, be suicidal, but Norman Lear okayed the idea and told you to go ahead and write the script. Were there other incidents like that where you had to go over your boss's heads?
No, thankfully. I think we kind of proved ourselves from there, but it's really ironic because the guys who rejected it, Don Nickel, Mickey Ross, Bernie West, had spent 4 or 5 years with Norman writing All in the Family and winning Emmys. So we thought they would spark to this, but I think they were in a place where they just wanted to go forward towards more and more, you know, they didn't want to have a serious story. So yeah, I read in Ebony magazine an article that said suicides among black women were the highest category of suicide in the country. And so I thought this is something Norman would like, but they didn't like it. They said, think of something else. So Mike and I came up with some other stories, and then they said, go pitch them to Norman. So that was their big mistake, of sending us to pitch to Norman alone. We pitched the other couple stories, and Norman was like, not real. We said, you got anything else? And we didn't have anything else. But then I said, you know, I was reading in Ebony magazine, and when Norman heard that, he loved it. We started working up a whole story. So then we had to go back and tell the exec producers, Don, Nicky, and Bernie, that when they were just like, you know, okay, go write it, you know, like nothing, you know, it was like going to be for 2 weeks. They didn't talk to us. Well, I write about it in the book. Finally, we turned the script in. It was like 3 days. We didn't hear a word from them. And we didn't know if we should start packing up our desk and getting out of there. But when I went down and asked Don, I said, he have a chance to read the script. He said, yeah. So what'd you think? He said, not bad. So not bad from Don was like, you know, an A plus from, went down and told my partner, Mike, he said, not bad. So actually we shot the show pretty much the way it was written in the first draft.
You wrote that the wheels of entertainment are duplicitous. Do you think TV writers get the respect they deserve in the industry?
Well, I think, that duplicitous thing, I make it in reference kind of to an age discrimination because, you get in fast, you break into TV, and then you get out fast. I mean, the hardest thing really is not breaking into TV, but breaking back in. I mentioned a writer I knew at the time who won Emmys for Get Smart and Laugh In, and then finding himself, hard pressed looking for work. It's far as getting respect, it depends who you are. If you talk to people who write plays in New York, they don't respect television or sitcoms, but they'd love to make the money that the television writers make. Yeah, if you're looking for respect, I don't know if you're going to find it in TV, but I think you can have a big influence. I mean, if you write plays, for instance, people might see them, but you write television, you got millions of people right away. Bigger influence on people.
I want to ask you about the importance of time slots. Over the course of 5 years, CBS moved the Jeffersons 10 times. Why?
I don't really know the ins and outs of all that. I mean, some guys my level pay attention to that. I really don't. Just keep writing and entertaining. But why they changed them, I would guess in a lot of ways it was helping other shows. So Jefferson's was doing well. They'd move it, and then it would help. It would be a lead-in for another show and maybe hurt the Jeffersons a little. But the upshot is that for 11 years, the Jeffersons stayed on longer than anybody. So a lot of people act like, oh, they were trying to kill it. If they wanted to kill it, they just take it off the air. And it's all about ratings. If they moved it, whatever the network does has something to do with money.
Now, obviously, one of the big reasons for the success of the show was its stars, Sherman Hemsley and Isabel Sanford. I understand Sherman Hemsley was a very shy, humble, almost reclusive man. In your book, you described him as a consummate performer and you compared him to Mick Jagger. How so?
Well, Mick Jagger, if you've seen his concerts, which took me a while, but finally got to see a couple Stones concerts. If the crowd doesn't respond, he goes out and gets them. He goes and he'll walk down, but he just goes and gets the audience riled up. And Sherman, if in front of a live audience, if that audience were just kind of laughing a little or sitting back, he'd just project and he brought you in like that. Yeah, he was compared to a performer like that. But like you said, he was the opposite. He was so shy and so quiet. When we first started there on the Jeffersons, he would come in our office, Mike and I, and sleep on our sofa when he was on break and stuff. And he would identify with the lowest person on the totem pole, In fact, Sherman, when we'd have dinner between shows, he would first make a plate of food and take it down to the guard at the gate. I mean, that was Sherman, Oh, he was great. Yeah, everybody loved him. I mean, he was, he could have said, hey, I'm the star and this is what I want. Never, he allowed Isabel all the praise and all the glory. We introduced Isabel last and called her the queen, and she was. But the two of them were together. They just played a couple you've never seen before on TV. They weren't like, Ward and June Cleaver or Ozzie and Harriet or Father Knows Best. They argued, like husband and wife. But you knew there was unconditional love there.
A few weeks ago, we had Ernest Hardin Jr. on the show, who played Marcus. He said that Isabel Sanford was like the glue that held the whole cast together. She was absolutely beloved by everyone, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was the queen. We would literally curtsy and bow, and when I did the warm-ups in the last couple of years, we'd all just. She was exactly that. She was the glue. She was just grounded the show. We could get pretty silly and pretty go off, but she always kept everybody grounded. She kept Sherman grounded. George Jefferson, the character, he get these crazy ideas, and she tried to talk some sense into him, and so it kept the show with a certain reality, and he knew that she meant well, but George Jefferson figured she doesn't really understand about how you got to compete with Whitey out there. You got to play Whitey's game. It's all about promoting your cleaning store. And she was great.
Incidentally, Ernest Hardin Jr. went on to co-star with Bette Davis in White Mama, and he's had a successful film career since the Jeffersons. You must be very proud of him.
Oh, it's great. I just saw Ernie now for the first time in years. Just last weekend we did a commercial for the book, for the Honky book. And he's great. And of course, he's a very talented actor. He was a young kid when he played Marcus on the Jeffersons. And then he, like you say, he starred opposite, I think he's the black actor who was starred opposite Bette Davis. He's done a lot of things. But yeah, he was great. We did a commercial. He had a lot of fun. He's joking around with his catchphrase, which was, well, all right, and stuff like that. But promoting the book, and I hope I do Ernie justice about mentioning him in the book. But Yeah, we actually, the network had said at the time, yeah, maybe they want us to incorporate a little youth into a thing. So we had like a talent search, and Ernest got chosen. But yeah, he's still working today, and a very talented actor. He's worked with a lot of people, done a lot of things, and we were very fortunate to have Ernie involved with the Jeffersons cast, and he's got his own stories. I'm sure to talk to him about. He's a good guy. I'm sure he'd tell me to say hi to you too.
Jay, I want to ask you about All in the Family, which was another landmark show from Norman Lear. You and your partner wrote the famous Draft Dodger episode for All in the Family, which the Writers Guild honored as one of the top 100 shows ever shown on TV. It dealt with the controversial issue of whether to grant amnesty to Vietnam draft dodgers. Is that one of the episodes you're proudest of?
Well, yeah, that has some history too. I think I mentioned in the book, it was actually first time I went to see All in the Family and saw Norman Lear and saw what he was doing. I went home and I wrote a treatment, and knew an agent, and they sent it to All in the Family, and the treatment came back, and it was about Draft Dodger. It was basically that story. That was 2, 3 years before we actually found ourselves on the Jeffersons. When I was on the show, I realized, Norman probably never saw a treatment. Nobody reads treatments. And the story at the time then, Jimmy Carter was president in 1976, and amnesty was a big issue in the presidential race, whether to give amnesty to these kids who went to Canada instead of went over to kill people in Vietnam. I went and pitched the story to Norman. Norman loved it, and we did it. You saw the episode. I write about it in the book. I actually was sitting next to Carol O'Connor's wife, Nancy O'Connor, when I watched it, and when tears are running down her eyes when that scene with Archie. The situation is Meathead's friend, who happens to be draft dodger, we went to Canada, is back to visit his mom at Christmas time. It's Christmas Eve. Stops in to say hi to his buddy Meathead, and they ask him to stay for dinner. And Archie has a friend coming over for dinner whose son died in Vietnam. So you've got a real situation there, which, you got the comedy, when Archie finds out this guy lives in Canada, he says, "Oh, you live in Canada, what are you, a hockey player or a draft dodger?" And it just goes from there. And yeah, it gets very dramatic.
Do you think the age of political correctness has made it impossible for a show like All in the Family to be made today?
Well, nothing's impossible. That's the way we Americans think. Anything's possible. I think they passed up a good opportunity this whole last 4 years with the president we had in there. That'd be a great time to have a show like All in the Family, and where the guy'd be defending the president, and Meathead would be going, "This guy, Arch, how can you, well, I just think there'd be a good comedy." Roseanne kind of started it. I don't know if you watched the beginning of the new Roseanne, but somehow Roseanne, seems to be her own worst enemy, kind of self-destructed the whole show. But yeah, I don't think it's impossible. I think if somebody ever tries that, it would be successful. The thing is different though nowadays with TV viewing. In those days, you had 3 channels. You were programming for the mass audience, and everybody, if you wanted to watch, you had to watch one ABC, NBC, or CBS. And you had, All in the Family, you had 50% of the people in the country watching it when it was on. But nowadays, you got so many different things on TV, and so people are watching different things. But it does impress me today, though, that you can do about anything. I mean, most of the cable channels, there's no limitation to words you can say, or even nudity or anything. So I think today you could, but I don't. The political correctness is a whole other thing. I don't really understand. It just seems so backwards.
When people suggested that the George Jefferson character was nothing more than a white Archie Bunker, you said no, Archie Bunker's bigotry is pure prejudice, whereas George Jefferson's bigotry is a reaction to prejudice. How does that difference play into the comedic aspects of their characters?
Yeah, as far as what I said about it, I said it as best I could in the book. So I'd encourage people to read it. But yeah, exactly what you said. George Jefferson's prejudice is a reaction to white people who enslaved his people, and who lynched his people. And even then, and even today, what we're going through now with voting and trying to limit the voting access for people of color. George was reacting to this when he's calling white people honky, and but Archie's kind of marginalizing other people but with these names.
Well,
And
do you
he
see
just
a difference in the fact that Archie Bunker was basically a loser, whereas George Jefferson was a self-made, successful businessman?
Archie was at best a lovable buffoon, and the lovable part is we kind of understand because we all have this little bit of like Archie and the prejudices that he has, but hopefully we are able to rise above him. But he's a buffoon in that he's a bigot and he's wrong about a lot of the things that, he's not very educated. And George Jefferson, on the other hand, at best is a hero. I mean, George has risen above. He's like David beating Goliath. He's got a successful business and 7 cleaning stores. And he's trying to. At worst, I think I say at worst, he's a workaholic who wants to give his family not only the best things, the adequate things in life, but the finest things in life. So he's working hard to do that. Whereas, Archie's just happy to be white. He just feels like he has accomplished something just by having a job and being white, and all these people out there who are just collecting welfare and they're too lazy to work. And, he's stereotyped the people based on color or origin or whatever.
Is your favorite Jeffersons episode the Martin Luther King episode, which was called The First Store?
Yeah, I think so. That became our tribute episode. Mike and I, that was us 100%. I mean, we were kicking around an idea about, we're talking about store ideas and thought, well, when did George how did he get a loan for his first store? He was a black man from Harlem, and how did he get started with cleaning store? And we realized that'd have to be like a flashback. That would be like, well, this was 75, it'd be like 6-7 years ago. When did he start? About 1968. And it hit me, hey, that's 68's the year Martin Luther King got shot. And I always kind of wanted to do something about Martin Luther King, but, how do you fit that into a comedy? But what if George, the day Martin Luther King was shot, what were the Jeffersons doing? And what if he was trying to get a loan for his cleaning store at the same time? And it was like, yeah, this is something we could do. Yeah, I think in a lot of ways it's one that we're really proud of. And I think I mentioned in the book, if we did no other show, for television, I think that would be fine. That it really embodied everything that I personally like to say, because the Martin Luther King thing. Martin Luther King was all about loving your brother, and all of us are together in this. I think I quote Martin Luther King in the book where he said, we all came on different ships, but we're in the same boat now.
Another favorite episode of mine is the one about the KKK called Sorry, Wrong Meeting.
Yeah, Sorry, Wrong Meeting. That's the same thing, for a while, I've always thought, I always take direction kind of from what I saw in All in the Family. And I thought, how can we do, what's something that All in the Family, they would do things you wouldn't expect. KKK, but how do you do KKK on the Jeffersons, and how do you make it funny, Think about things like, well, what if George had a white hooded outfit all of a sudden was in his cleaning place, and would he clean it or not? The Sorry Wrong Meeting thing, yeah, we actually have basically Sherman come face to face, literally, where he has to face, does he give CPR to a KKK white supremacist, and managed to do it with some humor.
The Jeffersons is the longest running sitcom of its era. And even now, it's the most highly syndicated of all the Norman Lear shows. Why do you think that is?
The comedy, that's what the viewers will tell you. That they laughed, and they never watched without laughing, and they always loved it. And, sick people say, I was laid up in bed and I couldn't wait for the Jeffersons to come on. Just love the Jeffersons. And even now, I own, like you said, they have the box set of all the Jeffersons, watch them all the time. Sherman, of course, deserves a lot of credit for that. We tried once to, I was thinking, hey, why don't we do a show where George Jefferson gets laryngitis, because he's always, and then George can't talk. Well, that'll be funny. And then start trying to write that, you realize, well, this isn't going to be funny. You can't have George saying anything, so that doesn't work. But George was what I would call our Energizer Bunny.
You and Mike were offered the chance to go and write for Three's Company. Why did you refuse?
Well, that was a show about farce, and we weren't interested in writing farce.
I think you made the right choice.
Yeah, well, I think so too. I mean, it wasn't really much. It wasn't really a Solomon's choice. I mean, we were quite happy. But
Jay, you described Norman Lear as and I'm quoting you here, a nuclear combination of creative genius and business acumen. You respect and admire him tremendously, that's clear. Do you agree that Norman Lear's key contribution to TV was proving that sitcoms could deal with serious subject matter?
Yes, that's a big yes. That's
Is there
exactly what-
anybody of that caliber in the TV industry today, in your opinion?
Well, that's a good question. Like I said, the audiences are different now. It was everybody had to watch the same thing on 3 channels then. There are probably a lot of people who are doing really meaningful stuff. I don't know if it'll be, if you could name any one thing that's a landmark. Certainly in black comedy, Tyler Perry has really accomplished a lot with his.
You discuss in the book that the Jeffersons was considered part of the golden age of sitcoms. Now that we have all these hundreds of channels and streaming platforms, are we in a new golden age of television, do you think?
Yeah, I don't know if you want to call it a golden age or a what, but certainly it's a different time now. It's a big question is will there still be movie theaters? I don't know if if we'll be able to say a golden age. Sitcoms today, I don't know. It's trying to think of, Curb Your Enthusiasm, I've always liked. Modern Family, I liked. Yeah, Blackish, a show that I'm still waiting for is a mixed family, black and white family. That's what I'm kind of missing. Blackish is a black family and it's a modern black family, but it's that black and white thing. I think that'd be interesting to see.
Jay, you were definitely not an overnight success. It took you at least 5 years after getting to Los Angeles to start making money as a writer. What advice do you have for young writers trying to break into the business? I think you refer to them in the book as perspiring writers.
My advice would be get a job if you can where you're actually writing something. And I had to learn. It took me years to learn what a writer does, and what in those days there were no film schools. When I majored in English, there was nothing about screenwriting. That was not even considered. If you told somebody in Ohio you wanted to write comedy for television, they just look at you like, well, good luck or whatever. Like you were saying, you wanted to be an astronaut or whatever. Yeah, persistence. I think I say in the book that persistence. If you really want to do something, you just keep at it, whatever it is, and try to learn, teach yourself. I had to learn how things work. The way it works in television, or it did then anyway, is you come up with a story. The way you get hired is you come up with a story that somebody wants to do. That's how you get in. So you come up with a story. It's all about story, really.
So nowadays, when you encounter a funny situation in your life, does a light bulb go on in your head that says story idea?
Yeah, kind of, but more so then. Like that's what I say. When you're doing a show, you're always thinking story. It's like, what can we do with George and Louise? How could they? If you say something about the lottery, it's like, well, what would happen if George? Or everything becomes, you're obsessed with it. Yeah, that's the way it should. So actually, I find in the past year I've written a screenplay and a couple of things I'm working on just on my own, based on. You get a story and you say, yeah, let's see. You want to see how this story plays out. You want to see how it ends,
Well, Jay, it's been a real pleasure having you on our show to talk about your career on the Jeffersons and your wonderful book, which I highly recommend to every fan of the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. I enjoyed talking to you, Harvey, and I hope we'll stay in touch. I'll tell Ernest you said hi.
Please do.
Good luck with your show. You have a wonderful show, and you're a wonderful person. I've read about your background, and you get 2 thumbs up.
Thank you so much. That means a lot. Our guest has been writer and producer Jay Moriarty, author of Honky in the House, writing and producing The Jeffersons. My name is Harvey Brownstone. Thank you to our producer, Steve Silver. Thank you all for being here. See you next time. And yes, I love the t-shirt.
That's the first time I've worn it. I thought of you when I was going to put a tie on, but I thought I'd wear this t-shirt. All right. Take care, Harvey. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it, Jay.
Remember to subscribe to the Harvey Brownstone Interviews YouTube channel. And be sure to check out more great interviews with Harvey Brownstone on harveybrownstoneInterviews.com.